HMP Isle of Wight mass stabbing horror as prison officers rush to hospital. Now, this attack on the prison officers happened last Thursday, but I have just getting around to doing this video now, and I've been waiting to find some updates. There's nothing more come to light, but I have had an email telling us a little bit about what actually went on and the fact that it was a bacon that actually done this attack. Now, the name hasn't been released, and in the email that I received from someone telling us about the attack, they did not state the email, and the prison is trying to keep it hush-hush. But obviously, when these prison officers ended up in hospital, it's been let out into the local medias, and then it's went not mainstream media, but it's went into the mainstream press, as in online, with different news articles, and they've all jumped on it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this attack. Then I'm going to go on to some statistics about what is actually going on and how many attacks there's been and why the attacks are on the rise at the moment. Because the prison estate is in absolute uproar. And I know firsthand from lads inside the prison, when they're giving us updates and telling us what's going on and the reason behind why the lads are attacking the screws. Obviously, in this case, it's a bacon which has happened on it says HMP Isle of Wight, but the Isle of Wight had two prisons, which is HMP Albany and HMP Parkhurst, and the prisons have been combined, but they do still have their own separate sites. A bit like Northumberland, which used to be Castleton and Acklington, that's been merged into one massive site. So the prison officers had been rushed to hospital. 3 of them had been stabbed, 1 in the neck, with the attacker narrowly missing the officer's artery. And like I mentioned, this has happened in the inpatient department, which is the healthcare department. Now, in prison, the healthcare department, some of the lads just refer to as when you got to go down to see the doctor, or you go down to see the dentist, you get taken down to the healthcare department. But down the healthcare department, they do actually have a wing for obviously inpatients. But in most of the prisons, in the inpatient department, on the hospital wing, which is referred to as, it's normally full of the bacons or full of the nonces, whichever term you want to refer to them as, but I'll call them bacons because we all know what the bacon is now. Everyone knows a bacon, and I'm sure the word has been flung about quite a lot by the subscribers since watching my channel. So HMP Albany is actually predominantly an ex-offender bacon prison. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Albany first off. Albany was designed and built as a Category C prison in the early 1960s, occupying the site of Albany Barracks. Soon after opening in 1967, a decision was taken to upgrade Albany to a Category B prison. So ever since then, it has been a Category B prison. Albany became part of the dispersal system. It suffered major disturbances in 1972, which closed most of the prison for the year. In 1992, Albany was redesignated as a closed Category B training prison. And in January 1998, Albany changed from being half vulnerable prisoner unit, which is a bacon. In prison, they call them VPs, vulnerable prisoner. But like I've said many a times on this channel, they're anything but vulnerable in society. And it's ironic, since they get put into prison, they then become targeted, and then they call them vulnerable. But they're anything but. It's a term that I do not like to call them, because they're not vulnerable. They're predators when they are on the outside. They're vulnerable to attack of the mainstream lads, but they are anything but vulnerable. They are predators. Just wanted to get that bit out there. Albany also operates as an assessment centre for the core ex-offender treatment programme. In August 2001, spikes had to be removed from the exterior of Albany Prison after it was discovered that some of the spikes were coming loose and being used as weapons. Prison officers feared that inmates could use the spikes as weapons against them. In March 2006, the kitchen providing meals to inmates at Albany Prison was awarded a 5-star rating for kitchen hygiene by the Environmental Health Department of the Isle of Wight Council. And I'm not going to talk any bit more about that. We've getting to the ins and outs of HMP Albany. So its capacity, or the population, was 566, but I do believe that the population will be a lot higher than that, because obviously with the prison overcrowding, and they have tried to turn a lot of the cells into double pads. But this attack on the 3 prison officers that happened in the healthcare department, the reason why it happened, or what I've been told so far, is the patient was down there suffering with their mental disorder, because he's a wrong'un, an absolute bacon, and something has happened in that altercation, and he's managed to get a makeshift blade. I mean, these can be made out of anything. I mean, I've got a pen on my table there, something like that. Pencils, pens, biro pens, anything like that can be used in prison to attack either prison officers or prisoners. And something like that going in your eyeball, it wouldn't take much for that to go in and for someone to either lose the eyeball, lose the sight, or if it penetrated far and hard enough, it could actually go in, hit the brain, and that would be either brain damage or the end. So there's any amount of things that they can use inside a prison, and the prison officers are actually getting the brunt of the fucked up system. That's the only way I can call it at the moment. They're understaffed and the overcrowding. The likes of these people, I mean, not just the wrong'uns, the lads that are on normal location, a lot of decent lads in there are suffering with the mental health, and they're in the healthcare department, or they're on the wings because they can't even get to the healthcare department because the healthcare units are very small. They might hold up to a dozen patients or prisoners at any one time. And if a lot of the prison staff don't turn in for the shift, or they had to go to other parts of the prison because there's been a fight or the disruption, or there's been riots, which has been happening a lot, or like I've just said, because they're so understaffed, then the ones that need looking after, the ones that are suffering with the mental health, aren't getting the help that is needed. So what's going to happen if you've got someone caged like an animal, suffering severely with their mental health, and this could have been the reason why this individual has attacked the screws, because what is also happening, a lot of these inmates are on medication for schizophrenia, a lot of personality disorders, some really dangerous disorders that need proper attention and proper care, where they need medicated 2 and 3 times throughout the day. And I know from first hand, and I know from lads telling us the situation inside the prisons, these lads are not getting the medication sometimes for 2 and 3 days because of the understaffed and the crisis that's happening in the system. So imagine someone with schizophrenia who needs these tablets to keep them under control. They've been banged up behind that door. There's all sorts going through the fucking mind. They've got all sorts in the pad, days on end to spend, to sharpen tools up on the walls or whatever, get a bog brush, chop it away so it's into a spike. The door opens up, the inmates are flying out, which has happened in this case. They went flying out and he's just attacking the screws, and 3 of them 2 of them were seriously injured because obviously they were rushed. The latest attack on prison guards is understood to have taken place within the inpatient unit on the Albany site. 2 officers were rushed to St Mary's Hospital on the island for urgent treatment. Hampshire and Isle of Wight police have launched an investigation, and the individual has been dragged down the segregation unit and probably had a good old fucking kicking on the way, but he's a bacon, we don't care. But it is happening to lads that it shouldn't be happening to, because they need the care and attention whilst inside there. Yes, they've been in there and they've done things, but like I've mentioned, I've met a lot of very good and decent lads inside a prison that are going being mistreated, and they're not getting the duty of care. And the screws sometimes aren't the ones that are responsible. It is beyond their control. They're understaffed. They're the ones that's in there doing the job, but they're getting the brunt of it when the door opens. So a spokesman for the Ministry of Justice condemned the assault and said, "Attacks on our staff are cowardly and unacceptable, which is why we push for the strongest possible punishment." The prisoner has since been moved to the segregation unit. So it does go on to say that a 32-year-old man sustained facial injuries, with a 28-year-old man needing treatment to his right arm, and a third member of staff received minor injuries. Prison Officers Association urged action to protect staff before there is a fatality. So there has been some attacks this year on prison officers, more so in HMP Franklin, which was more serious, of HMPAlbany, a terrorist who chucked hot oil over the screws and stabbed them up, which was a very serious incident. There was also another one which happened in HMP Woodhill in Milton Keynes, where a staff member required stitches after their neck and ear was cut in the attack. That was another very serious, violent offence against the prison officers. And I'll just go over, before I continue on, about some of the statistics. So attacks on prison officers and inmate deaths are at record levels in England and Wales. I mean, this one is outdated. This is from July. Obviously, it's now November. And the Ministry of Justice figures show 10,568 assaults on staff in the last year. Not nearly as many as on prisoner, but while the number of people dying in jail rose almost by a third. And it's not just deaths as in natural causes. There's a lot of suicides, and there's been quite a lot of murders as well, which has been happening, which is another, obviously there's been a bit of a cleansing of the bacons, but there is a crisis going on with the amount of people that's dying inside a prison. And a lot of these numbers that they're putting down as dying of natural causes is being brushed under the carpet, because a high proportion of these are actually by what they've done to themselves. Trying to be careful the way I word it on here as well. And I know this for a fact because me pals inside a prison that are ringing up and telling us how many of these lads are doing away with themselves inside a jail because of the fucked up situation that's going on there. So attacks on prison officers and the number of inmate deaths have soared to record levels. The Ministry of Justice statistics released show there were 10,568 assaults on staff in jails in the 12 months leading up to March. So that's not even counting the ones this year. Up 7% on the previous year. So this is the statistics on the deaths as well. The number of people dying in prison rose by nearly a third. After 401 deaths in the 12 months to date, to the end of June 2025, they included 86 prisoners who died in circumstances recorded as self-inflicted. An unprecedented 7 homicides were recorded over the same period. There's been about another 3 since then, so there's been about 10 this year. or 10 leading up to that rather, and the 12 months leading up to this, then the ones that have just happened recently. There is a deepening concern about the crisis in the prison service caused by overcrowding, inexperienced staff, gang activity, and escalating violence. And also, which I didn't mention, it mentioned about the one, Axel Cabana, who scalded one of the screws when they opened his door. He had a boiling flask, hot water in a flask, and he's launched it in the screws' faces. That was another attack, which was obviously being high profile. You do hear about them ones because of the type of prisoners that they are. HMPAlbany, Axel Cabana, two absolute wrong-uns who are due for prison justice, more so Axel Cabana because of the most recent events. And over the 12 months at the end of March 2025, prisons recorded 30,846 assaults, and 9% rise on the previous 12 months. But like I say, that's only up to March. This year has had record numbers. I don't have the figures in front of us, that's why I've obviously not reported it yet. But prisons reported a record high of 77,800 incidents of self-harm in the 12 months to the end of March. That's nearly 80,000 incidents of self-harm. There's only fucking nearly about 90,000 prisoners in the UK. So what does that tell you? A rate of 1 every 7 minutes. The rate of self-harm rose by 5% in men's prisons and 6% in women's prisons. So the reason why that has been happening, or this is happening because of the understaffed, inexperienced staff and the overcrowding. They released I think it was about 6,000 prisoners on the early release scheme. They've tried cutting down the sentences, but the early release scheme, I spoke about this loads when it first came out, because the ones that were getting released, but they were getting released on licence with a longer licence. So a longer licence means more time to get recalled. And the majority of prisoners that get released get recalled to prison. And for no further offences, down to probation and their fucking inability to supervise them properly or get on with them and have a good rapport. People on the outside who are out on licence get made prisoners by probation, get recalled for absolutely jack shit they've got a lot to answer for the overcrowding. The best way to ease the overcrowding is to not recall as many prisoners. A large majority of the prisoners recalled never committed another offence. They've never been to the police station. They've never been charged with anything. They've had a disagreement with probation, the poxy probation, and they recalled them back to prison. Over 6,000 people were released on the early release scheme. And it was 6,000 prisoners, which I said when I've done these videos, the ones that are highly likely to be recalled within a week or 2 weeks, which is exactly what happened. So they eased the overcrowding by releasing 6,000 prisoners altogether in this year alone to try and ease the overcrowding, but then the jail a load of more people. So then them spaces are filled up straight away. These ones that are being released early get recalled. What does that do? It overcrowds the prison even more. They haven't got a fucking clue. And what's happening is the prisoners aren't getting their association. Most prisons, if the prisons are category Bs, category Cs, and the lads and lasses are workers, they go to work or whatever, then they get out of the pads most of the day when they're at work, then they get the association on the night time. Or it's even worse for the ones that actually don't work. They're not getting out the pads at all. They might get out for half an hour a day if they're lucky to get a shower, when normally they used to get out maybe 2 or 3 times a day, once for exercise, maybe it's a bit of association in the morning or afternoon, and then again at night. But now they're hardly getting out the pads at all, and they're lucky if they're getting exercise. They might say, right, you've got half an hour out your pad, that's to exercise, have association, and have a shower. And make a phone call if you haven't got a phone in your pad. half an hour or an hour isn't even enough time to do all of that. Then they've got to run around and try and get the little bits and bobs, the ones that are grafting on the wing or the ones that want to get their illicit substances to get through the time. And it's not enough time, so imagine someone who is clucking, running around the wing, trying to get something from another prisoner, hasn't got enough time to get it, and then you've got the screw shouting bang up, but he's in the middle of getting his gear or whatever, and the screw shouting get behind your door. This prisoner's getting more and more infuriated. I'm even doing the movements because he's getting agitated, getting wound up, because he's so close to getting his fix. The lads are trying to sort it out for him. Then they've got the screw shouting in his face. He'll just pull down the land and lay the screw out, go back, get his stuff, and he's not bothered if he gets put down the block because he's finally got his stuff. He can neck it, get wrapped up, sit in the block, happily doing his bird off his nut. That is exactly what happens. But then on the other side of it, these prisoners that are behind the door clucking, the ones that need the fix every single day, because believe you me, the prisons are ram-packed with illicit substances. People are going into prison who haven't got or not addicted to anything. They become addicted inside the prison because it is so freely and readily available. So someone who's addicted and they're behind the door and the screws aren't opening up because they're understaffed, imagine what's happening. Someone who is rattling, headbutting the door, dying to get out. The anxiety's fucking riddling them. They can't cope with it. They feel like doing away with themselves because they need the fix. The door gets opened up. The screw's being cheated to them. He comes running out and just smashes the screws all over. And in some cases, more serious than not, they've sharpened something up. They're that angry, they've just took it out on the screw as soon as the door's opened. And that is exactly what is happening. And a lot of these aren't getting reported for whatever. Well, I needn't say it. They're not getting reported because they don't want the rest of the people, or the rest of, sorry, not the rest of the people. They don't want the general public knowing exactly what is going on inside a prison because they are crumbling. And I'm not just talking about the fucking buildings, because a lot of the prison buildings are crumbling, literally. More so the local prisons, the likes of HMP Durham and Pentonville, places like that. The absolute shitholes. They're not just crumbling on the outside, they're crumbling on the inside. And they don't want the inspectors knowing this. They don't want people higher up knowing it. The governors don't want it being released because they don't want their prison known as a shithole that they can't be run properly. So obviously the governors and the prison officers want to keep things under wraps. I did get told the other day by somebody on Instagram who sent us a direct message who's actually inside the prison. I couldn't verify the story, so I'm not going to talk about the prison or what had actually properly happened, but he told us that a prison officer had been stabbed up with a penknife which is readily available inside the prison now because there's that many drones coming in, dropping them off, and the prisoners are walking about, even though it's not scary enough walking around the prison when everyone's tooled up. They're actually tooled up with fucking knives now. There's all sorts getting took in. But this said prisoner has supposedly been trying to persuade the prison officer to bring him illicit things into the prison. He's refused. The prisoner has took it as a total lack of disrespect, believe it or not. And then he's then attacked the screw with his own fucking penknife, a knife that had been smuggled into prison. But there was nothing, apart from the prisoner that gave us the info, there was nothing more. I could verify it. So I didn't want to say which prison it was or anything, but I am just giving you a little rundown on what's happening in the prisons which are not getting reported on for obvious reasons. Obviously, the government doesn't want these figures getting released either about all these type of offences happening inside a prison. But there is another video I'm going to be doing maybe later on this week or over the weekend about HMP Millsike, a new prison, a super prison, 1,500 inmates, I believe, a technology-built prison, which is supposed to be a sophisticated, brand new, well, it is brand new, but a sophisticated prison, which has actually being taken over by the inmates. And this is another one where I know from first hand of people inside of there and lads from other prisons who have had contact. Because obviously the lads who have got phones, they're contacting each other in different prisons. The wings had been taken over. The screws had actually ran away. The prison had been took over. So I'm going to do a video talking about that because a lot of people who are watching this now probably have never even heard of HMP Milsike. So I'm going to be doing a video on that. But I'm going to leave that one there for now. I've covered quite a lot in this video. More so talking about the attack on the prison officers. But there is a lot more of these attacks happening, like I've said, that are going unreported. So I'm going to be doing loads and more videos talking about attacks inside a prison and talking about the statistics. And like I said, the reason behind it. Because a lot of people who maybe do hear about the prison news will be thinking, fucking hell, why are all these prison officers getting attacked? Why is the figures so high? And it's because the prisons aren't getting run properly. The prisoners are suffering really bad with the mental health. They're not getting released because they can't do the courses. They can't do the courses because they're understaffed. So how the fuck are these prisoners supposed to get released? The ones that are on parole sentences, like the IPPs and the lifers, if they can't prove that they no longer pose a risk because they need to do these courses, but the courses aren't on because they're understaffed. It's an ongoing fucked up situation. The HMP is absolutely on its arse, and you'll hear it right here on Behind Bars TV, first-hand experience and first-hand information of what is really going on inside the prisons. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And more importantly, stay safe.